Waivers, let me ask you this. Have you noticed personalized ads, 맞춤형 광고 for a product that, you were kind of interested in, although you never actually searched for it online? Well, recently, a major media company called Cox Media Group has been under scrutiny for allegedly using something called active listening, the software which may have collected voice data through smartphone microphones without user consent. Sparking a very heated debate. In South Korea, there was a similar case that happened in 2022, a couple years back, when Google and Meta, they were fined over 100 billion Korean won by the Personal Information Protected Commission for collecting behavioral information without proper user consent for targeted ads. So, I don't know. Let me ask you this. Do you think this is just advanced advertising, or does it cross the line into privacy invasion? So to delve deeper into the legal implications of all of this, we're going to be speaking with Professor Song Se-ryun, who is a professor of law at Kyunghee University. Let's see what he has to say. Hi, welcome back, Professor.
Thank you. Good morning.
Yes. This story, just looking at the implications of this, Cox Media, which is a very big company, and looking at this whole active listening software controversy, it really does raise concerns about the collection of voice data via smartphone microphones. And the thing is, I think many people, we have thought about it and we thought am I imagining this? But apparently it might be true.
Well, this is one of many things, many aspects of our movements, our preferences, and our interests that they're trying to find out in many different means. How many times do you go into a site and nonchalantly click off some consent with the small prints that you never read in full? So in terms of getting our information, these big companies have been really creative, and Cox Media matter is kind of a latest one that goes into our voice data as well.
Yes. So what are the key legal privacy issues involved here? And of course, tied into Cox Media right now.
Well, it depends on what kind of use they try to take out of it. And just like getting our footprints in many different sites, some companies try to find out which sites we go to find out what kind of interests we have. But this one, by having a microphone on, they are actively listening to what you're saying. And with Siri's, 챗GPT, and other programs, we get sometimes a good use out of having a app actively listening to you so that they can process our data instead of trying to get their attention every time. But they kind of conveniently cross over that privacy line and have us sign off to give them more data than we want. So it is a privacy issue. But the subtle distinction is that just like in the legislative scheme, whether it is a personal data or sensitive data, that makes a difference. If it becomes they're collecting our biometric data, then it is definitely a very sensitive data. But shopping interests, that's a little bit of gray area. I think that what needs to be done, is that the consent process, it should be more explicit, transparent, and known to the user so that we know what we are agreeing to. And we know what kind of rights we're waiving when we are clicking their their consent forms.
Yes. And so, Professor, for our listeners who are paying attention and kind of really concerned right now, they might be thinking, well, what exactly is Cox Media? But the thing is that Cox Media is a part of a group that allegedly is partnered up with big companies like Google and Amazon and Meta. So indeed, we are very much concerned because we use apps very much that, are partnered with things like Google and Amazon, these apps that we use every day. So, I mean, should we be concerned right now about how much of our personal data is being used in this way?
Well, I think we should be concerned. But even before Cox Media, there were many different ways that the companies could triangulate some data so that they know who we are and where we go and what kind of interests we have. Their primary interest is to have advertisement money and to find our shopping tendencies. But the Cox Media, this big company that partners with all those companies that have a lot of clickbaits and click numbers.
Yes,
they can get many different angles of data, so that by combining together, they pretty much find out all profile of us. I mean, in some sites they find out our phone numbers. In some sites they find out our ethnicity. Some sites some other things, and they have ways of putting all those things together, and that's explicitly illegal in our scheme. But how do we, police them? That is a big issue, and a lot of times we can't.
And when we talk about this illegal behavior, it not only does it bother people, the fact that it's illegal, but the kind of the ick factor, the fact that we're really creeped out, people are creeped out by this, the fact that they're listening in on our conversations, for example, without even having to type in something into our phone. But even 2 years ago, with Google and Meta being fined for collecting behavioral data without proper user consent. So if we had to do a comparison, how would you say legally this compares?
Well, I think it depends on what kind of uses they go by. In terms of privacy and in terms of data privacy, Europe had the GDPR, which is the law that put high emphasis on the consent process and the kinds of rights that we have. And Korea has a similar schemes that follows the global trend. But the problem with both is that they are not keeping up with the technological advances. We didn't have a 챗GPT 6 months ago, or was it a year ago? And this speed of how the technological advances advances and find out more about ourselves.
Right.
Kinds of things that we don't even know about ourselves. They'll probably put together as profilers would do. So imagine those kind of things can happen, already happening with the image data and then voice data and then whatever the nuances they can give. It's very frightening, but at the same time, it gives a big homework to the governments and the companies that if the consumers are awaking to the fact that their identity is like tantamount to identity being stolen and stored somewhere in a big warehouse. I think that the consent process should be strengthened, and there should be more safeguards that should be put into it.
Professor, speaking of consent, though, like checking or clicking on those boxes for consent, as you said earlier, with all the legalese or with a fine print, I mean, is there any way for this to be made easier for us to actually just be more made better aware of what we're actually consenting to. Do you think that there will be a day where this will become reality?
I think that's a very important and good point. A lot of people rush into the site and they just want to get to the good stuff.
Yes.
And so they click, click, click it away, not knowing that they are waiving or they are giving away important rights. So there has to be a awareness that you have to read those fine prints. But at the same time, I think the governments and court should kick into a consumer protection mode so that important rights should be in bold letters, big letters up front so that we know what we are going up against rather than being hidden in the fine prints. That's actually what happened in the middle of the 20th century when the courts tried to make important provisions in the insurance contracts and all those consumer contracts in bold letters,
yes.
in big letters, right? So those equivalent things should be happening in sites where, internet sites where the important rights are being dealt with.
And what would you say to people who might say, well, you know what, if you don't want your data to be misused in any way, then don't use any of the sites. I mean, in this day and age, isn't it difficult to say, hey, don't use that app or that? I mean, to avoid any of these apps because some of them are already built into our smartphones.
I think that's a very difficult question, saying that, hey, give up your smartphone, give up your computers, give up your digital footprint. That's the deal breaker for a lot of people, especially the young generations.
Sure.
But I think that the counterpoint could be made. For example, I mentioned the GDPR and the data protection laws in Europe. When they're emphasizing the consent right, they also beefed up this right to forget. So if you don't want your data or images from 20 years ago, 30 years ago, then you can ask and let the internet forget you. And that should be a right that you can exercise at any time. So the countervailing rights, countervailing safety protocols and safety nets should be also developed.
And so as AI and all this technology continues to rapidly just evolve and it becomes even more widespread, what kind of other legal challenges do you foresee for companies, that continue to collect personal data without transparency or proper user content? What do you see on the horizon? Do you think that this will become a bigger of an issue?
Yeah, I think that what we have been concerned about so far will continue to be concerned about things like the data leaks and their usage over and above what we have consented. Those would be very, very important safeguards that they have to put against. And I think that what we will continue to see is that the companies like Facebook and Telegram and the latest brouhaha, they'll be hauled into Congress or National Assembly and be asked and be put to have accountability for their self-policing and their policies and how they go about their business. A lot of it has to do with the commercial the profitability that they seek, but they have to put a certain limits as to what can be done and what cannot be done in terms of providing or safekeeping the rights. And then that's a very difficult issue. I mean, we see the Jeff Bezos of the world and the Facebook founders in the Congress, but after that, whether we see a very hard-hitting legislations come out or not, pretty disappointing so far.
And to wrap up our discussion, I was reading up on this professor, and it said that Google has since removed Cox Media from its partners program. Meta claimed that Cox Media is under review. Amazon denied that Cox Media was even its partner. So it seems like all the big tech companies are kind of taking a step back, trying to remove itself from this story that broke regarding Cox Media. Do you think that this is kind of, their way of trying to distance themselves and say, hey, we may collect data from consumers, but not in this way. We don't condone listening in, eavesdropping in on consumers' conversations?
It's a significant development, I think. These days, this data has to do with company that we can trust. So if they lose trust, their business is almost as good as gone. So they have to say that they value our privacy, and probably it's the first thing they do. They distance themselves from the companies like Cox Media.
Yes.
But we know that a similar scheme will come back in some ways, but we'll hope that they wouldn't be so, not to be so brazen like the Cox Media. But I'm sure with the advanced technology, they'll come back and try to capture our interest and find out about tendencies. So I'm half resigned to the fact that they will do that. So at some point, I'll probably try to delete all my digital footprints. But that will be a big decision.
Well, thank you for shedding light on this very kind of frightening and worrisome discovery regarding Cox Media. Thanks for joining us today, Professor. We appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you.